Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order, please. I understand there are no public comments today.
Sir. No public speakers today.
No public. So the next order of business is the approval of the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting of October 24th. A motion, please. All in favor? Opposed? The minutes are approved. Doug, would you please take us through the work plan?
There's no change to the work plan, sir.
Okay. And then we go right into the Finance Watch. There is no Budget Watch this month because the budgets are going to be presented at the regular board meeting on Wednesday. So as traditional, we don't do a Budget Watch during that month. So, Patrick, if you start with the Finance,
Sure.
the Finance Watch, please.
Okay. Finance Watch appears on Roman numeral 4-1 of the committee book this morning. We have 4 transactions to report. The first is a remarketing of $93.5 million transportation revenue bonds 2008 B1. These bonds had a mandatory put date of November 15th. They're very short. They only go out for 5 years. So we remarketed directly into fixed rate mode. And as you can see here, the all-in TIC of the transaction was 1.78%. Very short average life of just 3 years, just under 3 years. This was done with senior manager Goldman Sachs that also priced the next transaction, which I'm going to get to now, which is the $197,950,000 of transportation revenue refunding bonds 2011 C. These bonds were issued as part of our plan of finance to address outstanding 2 Broadway certificates of participation that are outstanding in failing auction rate mode. So the refunding occurred, freeing up debt service money in the debt service account that was then used to pay for the tender. So the tender itself, we received a very positive response from investors that held the 2 Broadway auction rate bonds. Just to remind the committee, there were $350 million of those bonds outstanding. 320 million investors responded to the tender, which was a good response. The decision to accept the tender at 97 cents on the dollar is what we did here, and that captured 230 million of those bonds. So there were some investors that tendered at a higher dollar price that we left on the table. We got a very positive response at that $97 price, and that's where we drew the line. So as you can see here, the overall plan of finance resulted in an all-in TIC of just under 4%, 3.99%, average life of 11.23 years. The expected savings on the 2 Broadway COPs are significant, and again, depending on what we assume for those bonds, how they would behave in the future, we're estimating approximately $70 million, or just under 16% on a present value basis. So I'm happy to take any questions about those 2 transactions. They priced the same day. Again, Goldman Sachs is book running senior manager on that transaction. It was a merit-based assignment based on an idea that they came in with. In the 2 Broadway, in the COPs, honestly, no. They're really there was some secondary market activity, very de minimis small trades that we could observe. Again, we haven't had a successful auction since the market itself imploded back in 2008 for auction rates.
Mr. Chairman. Pat, so how did the tender offer go as compared to what you had expected going in?
Well, we wanted to get a concentration of bonds off the table, and so we didn't have a specific target in mind going into the transaction. But clearly, if you're going to get into the market and do a deal of this nature, we wanted to have a good concentration of bonds. So to get the amount that we did, which is about 2/3 off the table, we were pleased with that outcome. Again, at a very good discount.
Anybody else?
Well, the investors themselves, no two investors are going to approach it the same way, and we are obviously not privy to that process. We sent out the invitation to tender. They evaluated the papers before them and the process that we laid out, which is a modified Dutch auction process, and each investor came to their own calculus about at what dollar price they would be willing to part with their bonds, and we saw a range of interest from investors who only wanted to tender at par to a group of investors that would tender at any price, and the range in between there. Again, we got the concentration we wanted at the $97 price, and that's what. Okay. Next on the list is a liquidity extension with Helaba Bank on transportation revenue variable rate bonds. These are the 2005 D1s. The letter of credit that we have with the bank was set to expire. We negotiated with the bank to continue their role in the transaction. And lastly here on the Roman numeral 4-3 is a conclusion of the novation of the DTF swap 2008A. This is a $350 million notional swap that MTA entered into with Citigroup Financial Products. Citigroup Financial Products expressed their desire to get out of the transaction and was willing to pay for our legal costs to do so. The swap rate, everything about the transaction remains the same, but we're now facing a much more highly rated counterparty in Bank of New York Mellon as the entity that the swap was novated to. So, any questions on the swap? Okay. Lastly, and it's not here in your book, I apologize for that. We do have an upcoming transaction. This is transportation revenue 2011 D, $500 million of new money bonds for existing approved transit and commuter purposes. We expect to settle this in December 7th and pricing the week before. This will be a rotational assignment to the next firm on our senior manager list, which is Ramirez and Company, will be the senior manager. And we'll have a WMBE co-senior manager on the transaction like we do all of our transactions. In this case, it will be Loop. Yes.
Doesn't Ramirez qualify as an MWBE?
They do, absolutely.
So you feel obliged to have a second one?
Well, Mark, we began the process back in 2008 of cycling up WMBE managers in the co-manager bracket into the role of co-senior, and we've just continued that irrespective of who's actually got the books on the deal.
By the way, this transaction was approved at which meeting, Pat? It was approved by our committee and the board at previous meetings.
At the
this
October meeting.
This is an information item for us today. Pat, is that it?
That concludes Finance Watch, unless there's any
questions. Are there any
questions.
questions for Pat before we move on? Okay, Doug, would you take us through the headquarters
Sure.
and all agency items, please?
Yeah, we don't have any action items this month. There are 3 MTA reports and information items. The first, it will be a presentation on the 2011 hedge program that will be given by David Keller, who's the Senior Deputy Director of the Division of Management Budget, and Pat McCoy. All right, David? Yeah.
Okay, this is something that we, if you remember, this is something that we promised the committee that Bob Four and his team were going to come back to the Finance Committee because nobody here was completely happy with what was going on with the fuel hedges over the last couple of years, and the senior staff under Bob's direction, I think, has come up with something I hope everybody's going to be happy with, and here it goes.
Yeah, and let me just kind of All right, thank you. The issue for me, one of the issues was we're doing this, again, to have budget stability. And so this is the first full year that we've had the hedge program while I've been here. We didn't do the hedges last year. But if budget stability is what we were trying to achieve, the question is how are we getting this information into our budgets? And having just gone through the first July plan where we were trying to do that, I was not comfortable that we were getting that information into the budget so we could work with. So that, to me, was one of the issues. The second was the way we were executing our swaps. Again, if the goal is to have good information that gets reflected into our budget, then the way we execute these swaps with frequency and periodicity is important. So you'll hear that. And then further, there were questions that were raised about what do other transit properties do? What are the procedures? And so we wanted to give you that information as well. So at this time, let me turn it over first to Pat.
Okay, thanks, Bob. So everybody should have this handout, and we're also going to show up here on the screen the slides that we were presenting. We began by speaking with some of our large peers in the transportation space. We spoke with LAMTA, MARTA, WMATA in Washington, SEPTA in Philadelphia, DART in Dallas, MBTA in Boston, and the CTA in Chicago. What we learned is that universally the other transit providers build their fuel hedging programs around a goal to provide budgetary stability and budgetary certainty. We didn't find any, and we thought it was notable, no agency surveyed is authorized to enter into speculative fuel hedges. With respect to policies and guidelines, we saw a somewhat divergence here, but consistently, though, there's some goal identified in terms of having a policy. LAMTA has a written fuel policy. MARTA and CTA have written fuel hedging or energy management guidelines. MBTA follows a swap and derivative policy approved by its board. We did talk to a couple respondents that don't have any specific fuel hedging policies or guidelines. With respect to the MTA, we do have a specific board-authorized staff summary, as well as our swap guidelines. Turning to the next slide, our peers, like us, use both diesel and natural gas, and those are the fuel types that they're looking to hedge their exposure to. There's essentially three core approaches to doing this: swaps, as we do, forward delivery contracts, or exchange-traded futures contracts. They're generally authorized to enter into financial hedges to lock in a fixed price or a cap using options. One notable peer is LAMTA, which does use collars, which locks in a floor as well as a maximum price on the fuel. But the LAMTA, CTA, and DART, they typically use swaps. They do occasionally use a forward swap or an option contract. We use a fixed price swap here at the MTA. The duration we see varies, but typically we see between 12 and 24 months. Again, one notable standout, DART, which entered into a long-dated future agreement for natural gas. It was done with a related state entity, the Texas General Land Office, so couldn't be replicated here, or would we recommend it. The percentage of fuel budget hedged does vary, ranges from anywhere from half the need all the way up to the full need on a volume basis. Actual percentages vary from the 28%, which is our current level, up to 100%. And then you see the 4 programs authorized up to 100, 3 of those are fully hedged, and 1 program authorized to 100 has about a third hedged. Turning to the next page, we see different pricing strategies by agency. We see a dollar cost averaging strategy employed by large peers CTA, LAMTA, and MARTA, where they ladder their hedges in on a regular timetable over 12 to 18 months, again, seeking to dollar cost average a part of or their entire fuel budget. We see market-based execution, where MBTA, for example, executes hedges when market conditions are favorable relative to their budget. SEPTA does both market-based execution and a dollar cost averaging. Lastly, we see down here long-term price lock, and that's what we see here with DART. That's just kind of a quick summation of the survey. We obviously spent some time speaking with our swap advisor that's been guiding us, and that's Swap Financial. And at this point, in the packet there is the last page is just a summary of the survey that we did and those entities we spoke to. That's a leave behind for you. And at this point, I'll turn it over to David Keller now.
Thanks, Pat. If I could just looking at these results, how did you feel about the percentage of the fuel budget that is hedged, now that you've seen that survey? Not to say that you didn't know that beforehand, but how do you feel about our number 28?
And that's going to be one of the things that we discussed at the end. Our recommendation is that we seek authorization from the board to do up to 50%. Right now, what we're dealing with is really a dollar amount, and so as your fuel prices rise, that dollar amount gets you less, and we would like to just have permission to go up to a specified amount. Percentage, yeah, of volume.
Thank you. While our fuel budget consists of both ultra-low sulfur diesel and natural gas, and while we've executed hedges for both commodities, I'm going to use diesel for my illustrative examples as I move forward. From this graph, diesel prices have fluctuated widely over the last 6 years. They dropped to $1.63 at the beginning of 2007, then rose steadily to $3.89 by June of 2008. That's mainly due to global demand reflecting industrial growth in India and China. Even quicker than that increase was a decline that occurred over 8 months to February 2009, when prices fell back down to $1.31 during the financial market meltdown. And once hitting bottom, prices began to increase again, reaching $3.27 this past April, with the steepest increases occurring during the Arab Spring and Libyan crisis. Lara? This year alone, prices have also shown significant variability in just the first 3 months of the year. Prices increased 86 cents a gallon from a low of $2.52 in January to a high of $3.38 at the beginning of April. On an annual basis, that 86-cent increase would equate to $67 million based on our volume, which is almost 30% of the MTA's fuel budget. The up and downs of the fuel markets have made forecasting difficult at best. This graph illustrates the annual fuel price forecast used in our last 3 February financial plans, 2009 in blue, 2010 in green, and 2011 in red, along with the actual average annual prices, which are in gray. The fuel forecasts used for these plans did not reflect the eventual prices for diesel fuel, and that is partly due to the basis for these forecasts. The fuel forecast for the February plan is usually unchanged from the prior November plan, and that November plan is based on forward prices at the end of August, meaning that the adopted budget is based on forecasts that are 5 months old. And as was seen in the prior slides, price volatility can be significant over an even shorter period of time. The forward prices I refer to are the future commodity prices traded on the New York Merc. They reflect the collective opinion of where fuel prices will be in the future. This graph provides the monthly forecasts of fuel that were used in our past 2 plans, February and July 2011, as well as the November plan, which is at the top in green. And you will see that on Wednesday when you see the financial plan. As mentioned just a moment ago, the February plan, which is in orange, was based on August forward prices. That's August of last year. With the volatility we have seen this year, fuel prices were increased for the July plan, which is in blue, and the July plan forecasts were based on May forward prices. In just 9 months from when the February plan was based to when the July plan was based, prices had shot up so much that our fuel price projections also needed to be significantly increased, putting an unanticipated mid-year strain on our budget. The prices that are the basis of the November plan are slightly higher than those used in the July plan. The huge change from February to July illustrates why we have been uncomfortable with the way we have been budgeting fuel, and for the November plan we have changed our approach. On Wednesday, when the November plan will be presented, that will form the basis for the 2012 adopted budget. To develop the fuel budget, agencies were provided fuel forecasts in September that reflected forward prices at the end of August. These prices are the basis for each agency's budget submission. MTA budget is now tracking actual prices as well as forward prices. In advance of locking the November plan projections, MTA budget estimated the impact of actual and forward price changes and made an adjustment to the consolidated fuel forecast to reflect the financial impact from that change. This is the first time MTA budget will be making a consolidated adjustment, which is the result of MTA budget staff's development of a methodology and model for capturing the impact of these late price fluctuations. I'm not done yet, Lara. After board adoption in December, the consolidated adjustment will be allocated to each agency and will be reflected in the 2012 adopted budget that is released in February. While this process is an improvement, it is only as good as the forward price curve projections of eventual prices. It still does not provide any degree of budget certainty. On this slide, the solid gray line is actual prices and the dashed gray line is the forward price of fuel as of October 31st. The green line, which represents the monthly price forecast provided to the agencies for use in preparing the November plan, plots the forward price levels as of early September. As you can see, the forward prices have declined more than 10 cents over the past month or so. The consolidated adjustment I spoke about is intended to capture this type of price fluctuation. This year, under board authorization, the MTA has entered into a series of hedges that are intended to provide a degree of budget certainty. To date, we have executed 5 diesel hedges in March, April, 2 in June, and 1 in July. As fuel prices have dropped, so has the price of each subsequent hedge. The black dotted line is the weighted average price of all the hedges. The current hedges each run 12 months in duration. As the earlier, higher price hedges expire, the average hedge price declines. But also declining is the hedge share of our fuel needs. The blended price, which is shown in red above, is the weighted average price of both the hedged and unhedged portions of our fuel budget. Also included again is the gray line providing the actual and future prices. When the prices spiked in July, the blended price was lower than the hedged portion of our fuel purchases. The blended price is lower than the hedged portion of fuel purchases because the hedge did not increase with the market prices. On the other hand, in September, actual prices were slightly lower than the blended price because, again, the hedge prices did not go down along with the market. This is what our hedge strategy is intended to do. It's supposed to smooth out the rises and declines, providing an increased degree of budget certainty. To illustrate the point, this and the next slide provide 2 what-if scenarios, a 10% price increase and a 10% price decrease. Each scenario assumes the price change will take place now in November. In this first scenario, prices shoot up 10% from the current forward prices. This is illustrated by the gray dashed line. The hedged-unhedged blend price in red also increases, but to a lesser degree because the hedge portion is not subject to the price increase. Compared with the November plan, prices shoot up 22 cents, but the hedge component makes the effective increase only 12 cents. That 10-cent differential equates to an annualized savings of about $8 million. Also notice the declining average hedge price, which is in the black dotted line, as it declines as the higher price hedges expire, but with a much smaller hedge share, the blended price towards the far right side begins to creep up as the percentage of our hedged portfolio declines. In the second scenario, the prices decline 10% in November. While there is savings relative to November plan prices, some of those savings cannot be captured because the hedge portion is locked. While the overall savings could be 15 cents, the effective savings is just 13 cents. As we executed our 5 diesel fuel hedges, the hedge share of our needs has risen to about 38%. But as those hedges expire, the first expiring at the end of this coming February, the hedge share begins to decline, and by next July, we will no longer be hedged. In order to obtain a degree of budget certainty, we need more consistent execution policy and stable hedged share. We believe a hedge program is beneficial to the MTA, primarily to provide budget certainty, which is why we'd like to continue to hedge fuel. We intend to do more regular periodic executions. We want to continue the program, and we want to extend the term of our hedges to 18 months, so every financial plan includes a full calendar year of forward prices. And we would like authorization to hedge up to 50% of our volume. Bob?
So again, to kind of summarize, the hedging stabilizes that risk in our budget. We have a number of things that can change. Our revenues can change, other expenses can change. Anything that we can do to limit volatility is good. We're not, though, talking about doing everything. We'd like to be able to go up to 50%. But importantly, we'd like to be able to stretch out the period of time over which we hedge. If you think about it, if we're trying to get prices, forward prices built into our budget, but we're only going out 12 months, that means when David is putting together the budget in July of 2011, we only have certain prices to July of 2012. If we can go out 18 months, we'll always have at least one full year of certain prices for whatever percentage of our portfolio we put in place. Whether we go to monthly execution, whether we go to bi-monthly execution, we just like to get into a regular periodic execution. I will tell you that having participated in execution on some of these earlier hedges that we did, there was always this risk, if you're not doing it regularly, of going, where's the forward price right now, what's the blended rate, and what's our budget? And you find yourself only thinking about where you are relative to your budget. This is the type of strategy where you're just supposed to be in the market executing all the way through. So, again, we would like to just know that we have a certain amount that we can put forward, a certain amount of volume that we're trying to hedge, and just keep that going. So when the hedges start to roll off, we have funds that are now available to be used for rehedging, and so keep that going. So again, the request that we will be putting forward as part of our December budget would be to continue our hedging program, but to do the hedging program up to 50% of our volume, to extend the maturities on our hedges to 18 months, and again, just to get into a regular recurring program. We will provide an annual update of where we stand on what the cost of the hedges have been, the benefits of the hedges. I don't think we want to do it at the same time we do our derivative portfolio analysis in October. I think it's just too much to cover, so we'll find an appropriate time to bring it to the board so you'll have time to contemplate the results. So again, that would be presented to the board as part of the budget for your consideration and adoption if you so choose in December.
We have a lot of questions I can see, so why don't we just start right here. Andrew, we'll just go right around. So
Bob, how many sources do we obtain fuel from?
We use it's spray, right?
It's Sprague, yes, for diesel fuel.
That's just one source.
Yes. It's our buses.
And what about diesel commuter trains? Same source or different?
Actually, Connecticut, I think, is a little bit different. They have a variety of sources.
What about the Metro North runs that are diesel or Long Island runs that are diesel?
Long Island, Metro North, I think they have a variety of sources. I think they go out in the market on those.
So would this apply to them as well, to up to 50% of hedging for those sources as well?
Their usage is included in these amounts, yes.
Right. And the last question would be, is an annual update often enough, maybe a 6-month update? Or
We can provide whatever time the board would like.
it's not a big deal. You want to know something in the realm of, it's money. It's real money, but in the scheme of what we're doing here, I really think, Andrew, once a year would be appropriate.
And
You can change it.
just to that point, though, whenever a fuel hedge would be executed, it would be part of the Finance Watch update on it, as they're occurring.
And these are done competitively. So right now we have 3 providers that we put it out to, and we're bidding, and we're continuing to have discussion to add others.
Who's next, Jim?
This was going by pretty quick. Where did we land on the 18-month suggested limit? Is that what you want? Is that what you think you can get through? What's the deal?
As you saw, I think in the survey, some are from 12 to 24 months. I'd just like to have a minimum period of time that will always carry me through one full fiscal year. So one
No, I was
calendar
thinking
year.
longer.
Yeah, we could do 20.
Is there any benefit to going longer that you can see?
Well, if they're favorable price, 24 months is fine.
Yeah.
If it's favorable prices, we could extend if we really think that the market is appropriate. But I think just having the authority to do up to 24 months, target 18 is
Okay.
flexible.
And the other quick question, which kind of runs against the mechanistic approach that we're taking here, is whether there's any felt need to have industry expertise in the oil and gas business, to whether it's bought or consulting or whatever, to be as effective as possible.
I think there's 2 responses to that. One is I think there is an energy consultant that the budget shop works with.
Yeah, we already have an energy consultant which helps us with fuel as well as electricity, and that's where we get our forecasts from, and that's where that's actually who provides us with the forward prices, and who has now shown us how to go about doing this ourselves, which is the basis of the models that we have now. But in addition to that, on the hedging, don't we have some?
On the hedging, we do have an outside swap advisor, Swap Financial, that works with us on executing the trades themselves and providing additional market intelligence that we find very helpful as we're preparing to get into the market.
Mark?
And this is actually a swap contract that you enter into. It's not a forward contract for delivery.
That's correct. It's a fixed price swap based on the commodity definitions as opposed to the interest rate swaps that we have on the bonds.
I mean, is it possible to look at a period of time and determine what this kind of stabilization costs, basically to compare the fuel cost over the last 5 years or something, and look at what it would have cost you to buy that fuel if you'd been swapping on an 18-month horizon or something?
I think we can. Yes, I think we can try to do some analysis that does that. With the swaps that we have, with the hedges that we have on the portfolio, we can tell you that as we stand today, the net difference is about $900,000 to the negative that we cash settle on a monthly basis. So that's where we are with these trades that we displayed earlier. But to take a longer-term view is something that we could try to work with our advisor on and try to put together a what-if analysis if we had been hedged going back, multiple years in time.
If you really take a deep breath and realize that you're not trying to speculate in the fuel market, you're actually trying to stabilize your cost, then you actually, I think, want a fixed term and a pretty fixed schedule. And you figure that you're just going to ride it where it takes you. Then it would be, and maybe it doesn't really matter because it may be harder to figure out than the answer is worth what the stabilization is actually costing you. It must cost something, but I'm just not sure that it's
Mark,
significant as compared to the risk.
If you remember, the reason we did this is the last couple times that this thing is, they made a presentation, everybody was kind of unhappy because it was hit or miss, just what you said. There wasn't a steady program. And then we asked the fellows to go back and to take a look at this thing and to put together a program to do just what you said, to stabilize the process that wasn't hit and miss, that they had approval. And that's really what we try to do here. So, I don't know whether we made money or could make money or not. That wasn't really the purpose of this exercise.
Yeah, you go back and look to see what we've done several years back, and a single hedge would be put on, and unfortunately it was done at the kind of. But so
I'm not asking about our result. I'm actually asking this sort of underlying mechanical question. We're buying something here, which is stability in our fuel cost outlook. And I would imagine that actually costs something, although I would guess that in this market it doesn't cost you a whole lot, actually.
Yeah,
I just don't know.
The execution costs are very small, and the difference between, the premium, as Pat said, when we're settling up, the difference between the price that we purchased in advance, if you will, versus the current value at that day is the $900,000.
Yes, but that's almost just sort of coincidental. I don't really care. I do care, obviously, but in this theory, we're not doing that. We're not playing the game because we think we're going to win the bet.
No, that's right. You're right.
Jeff?
So just quickly, my understanding is now the MTA budget office is going to be consolidating and forecasting these numbers and the fuel prices in the future.
We don't actually forecast the fuel prices. We obtain the forward prices, the future prices, right off of.
But this is going to be done at the MTA budget level rather than the agencies. I say that because I recall a year or two ago that was left to the agencies themselves, not just the forecasting, but the purchasing of either the hedge itself and the fuel.
No.
Was it the fuel contract with Sprague that we just missed entirely? I guess I want to make sure that future energy contracts, whether they be the hedges, the contracts themselves, are being monitored more at MTA headquarters than within the agencies, because that was a significant issue, I think, a year or so ago.
The hedge will continue to be done here at headquarters, looking at that. There is an initiative underway with the contract that we have with Sprague. It's basically a commodity contract with a spread on top of it, okay? And we are negotiating with Sprague to reduce that right now because as part of our efficiency initiatives, we're trying to reduce that, and that's being driven with the agency, between headquarters and the agencies themselves. So we'll address that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have we received the issue of the legal authority to enter into derivatives contracts, these types of contracts, either financial or otherwise, has been controversial. So I just want to make sure, have we received either an in-house or outside counsel opinion that we can enter into these contracts for this duration, for this purpose?
You know, our right to enter into derivative contracts was established about, 13, 14 years ago, and we do have an opinion from outside counsel.
And that applies to fuel hedge contracts?
Well, I was getting to that. We have not, to answer your question, no, we don't have a specific opinion on derivatives for fuel. I think, we're happy to raise this with outside counsel that gave us that original opinion and speak to them to this point.
Yeah, based on the statutory language.
Jim Henley's back there. Jim, would you be able to speak on this?
Yes, we'll pursue a specific opinion in this area because that seems prudent.
Yeah, if there's any question, or you can provide the opinion, I guess.
Extremely broad powers.
We've been doing this for 5 years.
To enter into contracts to further the interests of the MTA, the affiliated and subsidiary agencies, but we'll certainly-
Yeah, that has not been, it's a little more complicated, right. Thank you.
Chuck?
Are there underlying requirements contracts, and if there are there multiple laddered ones?
You're talking
Go
about
out 12 months, 16 months, 18, what have you?
for the physical fuel itself?
Yes.
I don't know the answer to that. We'd have to
Could
look
you let us know? Because if there are underlying requirements contracts, they would presumably have a figure in them, and you would have certainty for the period of that requirement contract. And it's against that you would judge Mark Page's question.
No, but again, remember, the contract that we do have with Sprague is for the commodity price based on the market price with just a spread built on top of it. So we're always subject to market volatility with that.
Yeah,
I yield to Mark.
I think what Chuck is asking is that, quite honestly, you could achieve the same effect that you're asking for with a forward contract,
Yes.
forward purchase contract, as with a swap. And when I asked you which you were doing, you said swaps, and I assume that's with reason that you think that's more cost effective.
Yeah.
Is it?
We will look into the forward.
Okay. Because
I mean, Mark, what I will take...
It's
Yeah.
two varieties of the same apple.
They are, because again, if somebody's going to give us a fixed rate, fixed price contract, they're doing the same thing. Yes. They're entered into their own swap. So it's whether it's better for us to do it directly or whether to use an intermediary to do it that way. So,
But the guy's giving you the underlying contracts in the business. We're not doing that on a regular basis. And so if you have a forward requirements contract for 18 months, you know you have stability. Yes, you may want to hedge on top of it or not, but at least you have the stability.
what I would do is we will talk to MTA Bus and the Transit Authority to see how, I mean, they're the ones who are looking at what's the best way for them to procure their fuel.
Okay.
And if it's in their determination that doing it at market plus a spread is the most efficient way for them to buy versus a fixed rate contract, then we can layer the swap on for our budget reasons, or if they believe that the best price can be obtained. So we'll have to talk to the operating agencies who do the procurement.
Alan?
If the goal here is certainty and not essentially playing the market, why are you only asking for 50% authority?
I guess at this point, I look at it as how much risk can we take? We could do 100%, perhaps, and that may be too much. I don't know. I'd hate to be in a situation where we've ended up being completely off where we could be in terms of the market. Perhaps as we do this more and we have a regular program and we become comfortable with it, we might ask at some point to increase it from 50 to 75, possibly up to 100. I just think I'd like to do it right now at this level, have a full year, 2 years where we're doing this regular program, and
But
if we're
but these
comfortable.
markets change all the time. They go up and they go down, and so unless you got a crystal ball, the last 3 years isn't going to necessarily tell you what the next 3 years is. So either the goal is predictability or it's not.
I think it goes back to the question I was asking, which is how much is it costing you to get rid of the risk? And if it's costing you a significant amount, then you ought to balance reducing the risk versus what that costs. And, I think what I'm really hearing is we don't really know, and we're kind of getting into it. We thought we'd get in half as opposed to whole to begin with. And that doesn't strike me as particularly stupid, actually.
So, again, what we want to do is we need to talk with the operating agencies and make sure that they believe that this procurement process on their part, that is buying at the market plus a spread, is the best way for them. Determine how much we want to have certainty in our budget, work with it, let's see how it plays out. If you see in the survey in the back of the presentation, basically all the other transit properties are using swaps. They're using financial, hedges to do these things as opposed to a fixed price forward contract. So I think we're approaching it prudently. We'll come back to you and show you what the performance has been. We're ready to reevaluate at any point in time. But again, this comes about largely because I was uncomfortable. How were we taking these prices that we're now getting and how to reflect them into the budget so, again, we can take advantage of that.
So, first of all, this was very good because we got everybody's comments, and that was the idea of this. This was for your information. We weren't going to take a vote on it at this meeting anyhow. So what we had planned to do was come back in December, right, Bob, and take a vote at the December Finance Committee meeting. So what we will do now is we'll take everybody's comments. The senior staff will go back. We're going to look into this thing, and then we re-present this again in December for a vote. We will have answered some of these questions.
I'm sorry, just one more thought. One reason to do it partway is that in stabilizing, sometimes you're going to look like a hero because the price went higher, and sometimes you're going to look dumb because it went lower. And the fact that you've done it partially is going to mitigate how extreme those, and the bad one being that the price went down and you're stabilized high. And you might not want to do that 100% to yourself.
The answer is we thought the 50% when they presented it to me. I thought that was a good half, just what you're saying, Mark. You can't completely get killed, but you'll have a good possibility of evaluating this over the next year or two. So anyhow, if that's okay with it.
Up to 50%, correct? That's the wording.
Well, I think we were going to really use 50%, weren't we, Bob?
Right. Well, we're not always, we don't necessarily always.
But that was the
there.
goal. 50% was the goal.
Right.
So anyhow, we will come back to everybody. We'll take the comments in, and we're going to present this at the December meeting, and everybody will have their chance to look at the whole thing. Okay? Doug, you want to go forward?
Sure. One more information item. We have the 2010-2011 station maintenance receivable update for the billing period 4/1/2010 to 3/31/2011. The total amount billed and received was $153 million.
I find it interesting that all the counties pay us the bill we send them, but the state of New York does not. Interesting context.
So noted.
Sure. Also included for your information are amendments to our committee charter as of November 16th, 2011. These amendments reflect some minor title changes in Section 4, committee meetings, and Section 6, key responsibilities, Item 6. This is just for your information, no vote required.
We have a governance committee meeting this afternoon, and that is on the agenda for the governance committee.
Next, we're going to move to headquarter procurements. We have 5 for a total of $7,604,000, and we're looking for your approval.
Okay, we have a motion, please, and a second, please.
Wait, okay.
Is that okay, second? Do we have a second? Yep. Okay. Before we vote on this, though, I just wanted to bring up on page V12 the Price Waterhouse Coopers, there is a $913,992 procurement here for Price Waterhouse Coopers, which was part of the Accenture contract originally for the business center. Everybody knows we had some difficulties in implementing the business center, and while it's making, Charlie assures me it's making tremendous progress now at this point, we did have a very rough start. And I felt at this time that we should bring, not at this meeting, but at the next meeting, a review of the whole Accenture contract, how much is expended, how much is left to go, and an evaluation by the people work with them what's happening there, because this was an expensive contract. The business center is obviously something that's very key and for our future here at the MTA, and we paid a heck of a lot of money, I think, for the Accenture contract, and the fact is here we're now giving part of the responsibility that was under the Accenture contract to Price Waterhouse Coopers. I'd like to understand what's happening there, especially in view of all the difficulties we had, in implementing in the startup of the business center, if that's okay with my fellow board members. Jim, everybody's comfortable with that? So then we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Wait, I had a couple questions. I didn't know, that's what I was trying to do.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two quick. Are you, the vote you're just doing now, does that include the personal service contracts, or is that separate? All right, so a quick question on one, the all agency as needed. Is that basically constructing a list, and from that list, various firms will get assignments? Page
The market research?
V-10.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the market research.
Yes.
Yeah, this would be the outer limit of those. Yeah, Cliff? Cliff here? Yeah. Cliff will, he knows this contract pretty well.
Good morning. Yeah, what would happen here in this case, these contracts, there's 8 contractors, and as the need arises, we would go out to all 8, and whoever gives us the lowest price for that project would be awarded the contract on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And then could I ask one more question on the one you were discussing? I note that it's a, hold on, you have the way this book is constructed, just hold on a sec. This is an expansion of, I can just do it without finding it, expansion of existing contract, that V-15, yeah. And that there's so it's approximately 21% modification of the existing contract. Was it essential to continue with this existing, was it deemed by the professionals essential to continue with this existing vendor? Or could this have been separated out into a new quick mini competitive process? V-15, the Price Waterhouse Coopers?
We've had 2 contracts, one with Accenture for the sort of software work and implementation of the PeopleSoft system as part of the Business Service Center. And then second, we had a contract with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Actually, it was formerly an organization called Diamond Consulting, which was bought by PricewaterhouseCoopers to provide quality assurance services for the overall process. As a result of the experience that we had with the first release in January 2011, we've decided to change and to expand the scope of Diamond Consulting's work to make Release 2, which involves the payroll and human resource systems primarily for New York City Transit, go more smoothly. Since we believe we have excess money in the in the Accenture contract. And since we have a lot of experience now, and Diamond Consulting had a lot of experience with the issues that arose during the first part of the release, and also since they were retained for the second part of the release anyway, all that we were really doing was expanding their scope somewhat to have them look not only at the quality issues in the business service center, but also at the overall implementation issues that are also related to the agencies themselves. Any of these implementations involve not only work that goes on from an IT point of view, but also work that goes on from a change management point of view. And we thought it was both efficient and prudent to just move the money from one to the other.
So what you're saying is it was efficient and prudent, and you didn't think it should be split or a new competitive process should be undertaken?
That's correct. Again, we already had retained the services of Diamond Consulting throughout the second release, which is coming up next year, but we thought that their scope was too narrowly defined for them to provide the kind of quality assurance that we wanted of the entire process.
Okay, and then as far as the price charge, the last paragraph on V-15, which is also earlier in the summary, so there were negotiations, and you were able to negotiate down and save some money, but then you say the fully loaded hourly rates previously established will remain fixed. I don't follow those two sentences. Was it decreased or is it fixed?
Well, what happened was they initially went up on their price, and we negotiated. So the fixed amount of not $9.13, of course, is fixed, but those hourly rates is what really drives that cost. So when we negotiated, we said to them, no, those rates have got to remain the same as what's in the current contract. So that's where we got there.
So what was, okay, I follow.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Yes.
Two questions. Charlie, what you were effectively doing with Pricewaterhouse or Diamond was effectively sole sourcing them, and they had the extension. Isn't that terribly anti-competitive? Why didn't you even consider asking someone else if they could do the same job for a better price?
Well, I can't have two contractors doing the quality assurance work for one project. All that I've done is, my view was that we had too narrowly defined the quality assurance responsibility of Diamond in the first part of the project. Okay. We had them looking solely at what was being done within the BSC and not what was being done in the agencies, which are an important part of the process. Okay. And so if we're going to do this, I think learn from that experience, we needed to have them looking at the entire implementation, not just at the narrowly at the BSC's implementation. What we found in Release 1, as I think I've mentioned at previous committee meetings, probably this committee in fact, was that the training was not adequate in Release 1 for the agency employees. Some of the process change efforts were not adequate, but those had been beyond the scope of the quality assurance efforts in Release 1. That was a mistake. So it makes sense to have one organization looking holistically at the entire implementation, and the firm that is already retained to do that is Diamond.
Okay. Second, if I may, is looking at the Cassidy, Turkey, New York, or Turley, New York. My question is the following. Prior to the competitive negotiation, what publication, what notice was given soliciting bids from others?
If I may, as required by law, we've advertised in the Daily News. We also advertised in the New York State Contract Reporter. We also develop a list of contractors from just our experience that we would send notice to and say, look, we're going to be out there. Are you interested? So there's been a full knowledge of this procurement.
This is a real estate brokerage
Yes, sir.
contract.
Yes, sir.
The Real Estate Board of the City of New York and a whole bunch of newspapers in the real estate industry are the ones that target the real estate industry and the brokerage community. What you've mentioned doesn't anywhere come near that.
Well, I'm not quite sure. I think we may have done that too. I just don't have information in front of me.
I'm confident, Chuck, although this was done through procurement, that they used a list of all of the major and minor brokerage firms that are known to us, which is the same list and probably more. They got advance notice of our RFP for the office brokerage.
Just for the heck of it, if you could
contract.
let me see what they actually sent out, I'd like to see if it fully covered the field. Because I have a hunch that there were a significant number of very well-known brokerage firms that had no clue that this was going on.
Well, let me just, if I may, just speak to the nature of this solicitation. As you know, we have undertaken a major office right-sizing exercise for which we had very significant competition among the brokerage firms. I will tell you without wanting to denigrate this contract in any way, that this is an assignment to help us on an as-needed basis with a relatively limited number of relatively small retail properties as they arise. Generally speaking, we do our marketing for newsstands and smaller retail spaces and the like in-house. What we found is that as occasions arise to market special properties like obsolete train stations, for instance, as we did for Metro North, that we have occasion to try to get out relatively quickly and nimbly with brokers, and because our procurement process takes some while, we wanted to get out in front of this opportunity. But I think the number of properties that we'll be marketing in this way is relatively small, and the aggregate size of the
All I'm trying to get
of the
across
properties
is the
small.
message that we need to be sure that those who are in the field, the brokers, the brokerage community, through whether it be the real estate board or otherwise, are given notice and knowledge and an opportunity to bid, only because you hear the mumblings of, I never knew it was going on.
Well, I doubt that. To the best of my knowledge, we did just that, and we can get you the list of people who got
We'll
this
get, Chuck,
solicitation.
we'll get you a list, but we should move forward now at this point. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor? Opposed? 1 second. Alan, what?
Please mark me as abstaining on fuel agency as needed quantitative market research study.
Okay, Doug, you got that? Yep. Okay, so, all in favor? Opposed? The procurement's carried. Doug, go ahead, next.
Sir. Next, we move to the Metro North and Long Island Railroad Committee agenda. There are two procurements for Metro North for a grand total of $30,835,000.
These were approved at the committee meeting, right? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? So passed.
We have three joint competitive procurements with Metro North serving as the lead agency for a grand total of $48,283,000.
Again, these were Jim, these were all approved. Okay, all in favor, please? Opposed? So carried.
There were no items for MTA bus operations, bridges and tunnels, New York City Transit, or FIMTech. That would conclude the finance portion of this agenda.
Right. Okay, now for the real estate portion. Jeff, please.
Thanks, Andrew. Before I turn to the action items, I'd just like to give you a brief update on some of the projects that we've been working on. I alluded to the office right-sizing exercise. I'm pleased to tell you that we're deep into that process. We've been interviewing department heads and other personnel at all the agencies. We're focused, as you know, on figuring out what the optimal incursion is, if you will, at 2 Broadway, so as to increase our density down there and ultimately facilitate a sale or lease of these buildings, which is, apart from expense savings, our ultimate prize. And we are, by the same token, well into the effort to program our space needs for Metro North and to identify suitable properties for relocation of Metro North in the environs of Grand Central and points north. A couple of months ago, I reported to you on the results of our comprehensive review of master lease and other MTA agency properties that we jointly control in some way with the city, and identified 8 properties, including 370J, that we would be working with EDC to dispose of. I can tell you that we are on track to issue an RFP for 7 of those properties this quarter or the very beginning of next quarter. If we hold off, it'll be just to avoid trying to get attention in the holiday season, and then I expect that pretty hard on the heels of that first solicitation will be our RFP for 370J. We are getting phone calls about 370J, and we expect fairly lively interest. And as promised, next month I will be Bob Paley and I will be reporting to you on our review and strategy for undertaking the same sort of initiative with respect to our suburban properties. I wanted to take this opportunity to comment on some great news that we had last month. Shortly after our last meeting, the mayor and various other officials joined our developers related in Oxford at an announcement on the site of the West Side Yards project that Coach is signed on to buy a 600,000 square foot commercial condominium in the inaugural tower at West Side Yards. That's about 1.7 million square feet mixed-use tower that will be going up at the northern terminus of the High Line, and the developer will also be proceeding with what we call a podium for the culture shed and an initial residential building on the so-called terra firma adjoining the tracks there at Camera Yards. So I think obviously this is a very exciting development. I think it vindicates our strategy, which we brought to the board about 1.5 years ago when we went forward to contract with Related in Oxford on the economic terms that had been established prior to the crash, but allowing them some relief in terms of the timing of the transaction. As you may recall, there were some 3 economic triggers that we devised to establish when the market had recovered to the point when they should be compelled to close. But really the essence of the arrangement was that we had an active and committed developer, and I should say invested developer. They've paid some $64 million in expenses or deposits or into escrow, in addition to many tens of millions of dollars of their own money in planning and design work. It's the fact that they've been in harness all this time that has resulted in this really very favorable development. This is not found money for us. It's money that we're counting on already in our capital plan, but certainly not anything to be taken for granted.
Maybe you just said it and I missed it, but it's my understanding that under the terms of the related deal with Coach, the conditions that we had allowed them to take time until they were met no longer apply. That basically that whole delay structure is waived in terms of what they're doing going forward with Coach.
Yeah, I mean, the trigger is established outside deadline
Fine,
for them
but
to
the
close.
triggers are no longer
And
relevant, as I understand it.
Well, the triggers will no longer be relevant
Assuming they go
when
forward
close.
in contract, yes.
When they close.
Yes.
But it is their obligation under the contract to close with respect to the entire eastern rail yard, and then a year later with respect to the entire western rail yard. That was the essence of the transaction. They can and will proceed in phases, but we always knew that getting the first shovel in the ground was the key to getting the money coming in over time. Any other questions? Okay. We have a relatively light agenda this month. There's 3 action items, which, as always, are summarized in our staff summaries in the book. I'd be glad to take any questions about any of them. I might just comment on the proposed transaction in Lynbrook. This is an example of a relatively difficult transaction that we sometimes have to enter into that does not generate a great deal of cash. You know, we have recurring income of some $200 million that my department is responsible for generating. In this instance, I think the cash in will be relatively small. We're projecting some $250,000. I apologize, in present value, but the principal benefit of the transaction is cost avoidance. Is what it costs some $2 to $3 million for the Long Island Railroad to clean up this site and enter into, in effect, a speculative development, which is not something that's provided for in our capital plan.
A motion, please. A second. All in favor? Opposed? So carried. Oh, I'm Jeff.
No, that's all
I'm
right.
sorry, I
We
didn't
can
mean
talk
to.
offline. I don't want to bore the committee. It's very local. It's across the street from my house, but I actually question who owns one of those.
Don't you have to?
Okay.
Jeff, you have to recuse yourself anyway. It's across the street from your house. Okay. A motion to adjourn, please. Okay. All in favor? Thanks. We'll see you Wednesday.